On April 23rd of 1987, a paranoid man went on a deadly rampage at a strip mall in Palm Beach, Florida. Afterwards, he claimed he didn't even remember doing it. This is the case of William Cruz. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also currently development of the world's first time machine. My flux capacitor can go at any speed. I've been able to evaluate the intrepid disseminator. We're going back to 1647, baby. But anyway, today we're going over a rare case that a few of you will have ever heard of before. It's about a man whose isolation and loneliness turned into pure madness. Also, thank you to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video. More about them later. William Bryan Cruz Jr. was a stereotype. He was known as that crazy old man who got mad at kids for playing on his lawn. The type of old geezer whose parents said not to mess with, and whose kids messed with anyway. But the truth is that William wasn't always like that. Many years before, he was born in Kentucky in 1927 and raised in a little town called Irvine. Irvine is about an hour southeast from Lexington. William's early childhood was a relatively normal one. His parents' names were Dora and William Bryan Cruz Sr., aka WB. Dora and WB owned and operated a couple of cafes in the nearby area, and they were both well-dressed and seemingly respectable people. Growing up, William Jr. was a small, quiet kid who was given the nickname Weasel. He wasn't big into sports, and whenever he saw other kids playing basketball or football, he would just stand on the side and watch. William was a loner. He had no close friends and never really spoke to anyone outside of his immediate family. Even his own brother claimed to not have been close to him, despite the fact that they grew up in the same household. William did have a pretty tight relationship with his father, however. Together, the two of them went fishing and hunting a lot, and it was one of the only true bonds William made in his entire life. When he grew into a teenager, William went to a high school known as Irvine High School. According to teachers, William came into class well-dressed, with a neatly pressed suit and a tie. Generally, William's classmates were pretty nice to him, and he was nice back, and there was really no hint of any malevolent nature to his personality. As far as grades were concerned, he performed pretty average. One year, he got held back, and this happened to coincide with the divorce of his parents. Nevertheless, after graduating from high school in 1946, William was accepted into the University of Kentucky. Here, William first majored in history and then continued his education until 1954, ultimately graduating with a bachelor's in history and a master's in library science. The only noticeable change in his personality early on took place during graduate school. People who knew him say that while he remained quiet, he also took on a bit of a sarcastic bend to his attitude. According to one woman, it was like he carried a chip on his shoulder. But one really strange thing that happened during this time frame, in either 1949 or 1950, was that William's father, WB, went on a shooting spree at the home of a local prosecutor. As the story goes, the prosecutor had charged WB with selling alcohol in what's known as a dry county, aka a county that still prohibited the sale of alcohol. This was on top of another charge for having an illegal slot machine. Because of both of these charges, the prosecutor padlocked WB's restaurant. So you can probably assume that after all of that, WB would have some money issues. And if you also don't know where your money is going sometimes, well, That's kind of like me. I recently found out I was being charged every month for not one, but two fitness app subscriptions. Realizing that, I started to think to myself, well, what other apps or services am I being charged for that I forgot over the years? Thankfully, the sponsor of today's video, Rocket Money, is here to help. They helped me get rid of a bunch of random subscriptions to services I don't even remember signing up for, which saved me a good amount of money. It wasn't just those two fitness subscriptions, but a bunch of other ones as well. Rocket Money is the app you need to save more and manage your money better and today. This personal finance app allows you to manage subscriptions, lower bills, build a custom budget, and grow your savings all in one place. I love using Rocket Money to cancel unwanted subscriptions because they safely and securely identify recurring charges and they cancel those unwanted subscriptions for you. You can even cancel from inside of the app with just a couple of taps. And no need to worry about customer service calls. Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year when you use all of the app's premium features. In canceled subscriptions, they've helped to save over $500 million. If you also want to save some money by canceling your subscriptions, or maybe you just want to take control of your finances today, go to rocketmoney.com/hightimecrime to get started for free. Thank you again to Rocket Money. But one day, W.B., William's father, became so frustrated he took a shotgun, went to the home of the prosecutor, and shot into the home. At the time W.B. did this, there were as many as 6 people inside the house, including both the prosecutor and his family. Now, in the end, nobody was killed or even shot, but W.B. was given a 5-year prison sentence and claimed not to remember having done it. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because it's sort of a very interesting anecdote considering what took place later on. And as you'll soon realize, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Anyway, only a month after graduating from college, William got his first job as a librarian in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. This job was not really a normal library job. William actually drove something called a bookmobile, which is just a mobile library, or like a car with a library inside of it. William did this for about 6 months before moving to Cincinnati, Ohio in 1955. While in Cincinnati, William found love. He got married to a Turkish immigrant by the name of Melahat, or Melly as he called her. Melly was a very outgoing and beautiful woman with dark black hair. In many ways, the complete opposite of William personality-wise. She made friends very easily and was well liked. Despite originally starting out as an English teacher in Turkey, Melly moved to the United States and found her calling in being a librarian. Both William and Melly worked at the same library in Cincinnati and lived in a couple of different apartments throughout the next several years. Ironically, being a librarian was not a job that William was really that good at, simply because it requires interaction with other people. Not necessarily a lot of interaction, but enough to make William uncomfortable. But after many years of this, William and Melly each retired in the year 1967. Then for about 6 years, they lived in Turkey with Melly's family before returning back to Kentucky in 1972. As the next decade progressed and William got older and older, things began gradually falling apart. Melly was diagnosed with degenerative Parkinson's disease, and William, who had never been a big drinker, became an alcoholic. One violent incident that took place in 1978 involved William and his brother's friend. Apparently, during one evening when William was visiting his mother in her Kentucky home, his brother and another man, Gene, were both drinking together when William asked them to be quiet because it was disturbing his mother. By this point, William's mother, Dora, was very old and sick, and had to be looked after. Eventually, William and Jean got into an argument, and William wound up shooting Jean in the elbow and grazing his forehead. Luckily for William, even though he got arrested, Jean decided not to press charges. But this was definitely an early sign of William's willingness to use guns when he got angry. And to be honest, this incident was nothing compared to that which was to come. After moving to Palm Bay in 1985, a much older William settled down in a little suburban house that looked like this. He and his wife moved here to get away from all of their problems. They decorated the outside with red ceramic seahorses, while the inside was filled with old-fashioned furniture and framed pictures of family members. On the day William and Melly moved in, the next-door neighbor saw their car's license plate and asked if they were from Kentucky. As opposed to just telling the neighbor that they came from Kentucky, William told them that his grandfather owned a farm out in Kentucky. That same day would be one of the last that William would ever have a cordial, friendly conversation with his neighbors. For the most part, he and his ailing wife kept to themselves. William kept up with his immaculately trimmed yard, while Melly, whose disease had since progressed, had to be cared for. But before long, William began having some serious issues in the new neighborhood. And for whatever reason, an extreme paranoia and anger took a hold of him. Whenever neighbors waved to him, he'd either ignore them or shake his head. Additionally, on multiple occasions, he took his rifle and shot it in the air outside as a warning to kids not to trespass on his property. He would say things like, "Get off of my land," and make threats to the kids to stay away. One of his next-door neighbors by the name of Margaret was quoted as saying he was a psycho. He really disliked children very, very intensely. He was out there the minute they came home from school to make sure they didn't bother his property, didn't walk across it. But it wasn't just kids that William hated. Another person who lived near him, a 39-year-old construction worker named Ray, claimed that one day when a friend dropped him off at his house, William aimed his rifle at him from across the street and shouted, "You made me lose my job. I'll get you for this." William was quickly becoming a stereotype out of a horror film. In the fall of 1986, a few people in the neighborhood filed a petition stating that William was dangerous, and they asked the authorities to investigate him. However, nothing really came from this, and the situation only got worse. Partly because of the myriad of issues William had there. He attempted to sell the house, but according to the neighbors, the asking price of $54,000 was just too high. Now, because William was retired by this point with a sick wife, a lot of the time was spent dealing with his wife. Melly's Parkinson's was so bad by this point that she couldn't do a lot of basic functions herself and she needed help. When William did find free time, however, he liked to go fishing and canoeing and read at the local library. In early 1987, during one of his many trips to the library, a neighbor caught him reading a book about mass murderers. Prior to this, he was only known for reading stuff like the Wall Street Journal and newspaper comics. So this was yet another warning sign, and all in all, every indication pointed to William being a dangerous threat. Only a week before what would take place, William evidently chased a 6-year-old boy up the street, making lewd remarks to him. As a result, the man's father filed a complaint to the police. But after interviewing William, the police officer assigned to the dispute just told the man to make sure he kept his kid away from William, and that was that. Apparently, during his interview with police, William remarked that somebody at the local store recently had stuck his tongue out at him, which William took to mean that the man was accusing him of being. Clearly, William was very uncomfortable with either the thought of generally or his own. Even when he lived in Kentucky, he was fearful of being accused of being gay, and he was convinced the entire town thought he was. Overall, this was just part of a broader trend of William's personality that included distrust of others and general paranoia. However you would describe it, William Cruz was a ticking time bomb, and that bomb was about to explode. On the evening of April 23rd of 1987, William Cruz made his wife Melly dinner. As usual, William was already in a bad mood. He was drinking heavily and already drunk, something that Melly specifically requested him not to do, but that he did anyway. Shortly after 6 p.m., William was looking through the window of his home when he witnessed a bunch of kids riding their bicycles across his lawn. As we talked about, this was not the first time he had conflict with the kids, and so by this point, he was just fed up. Quickly, William went and grabbed a semi-automatic rifle, a Ruger Mini 14 carbine, and walked outside. With the gun in his hands, he took aim at the boys and fired across the street, but only managed to hit one by the name of John Rich. The rest escaped up the street. At the time he was shot, John was across the street playing basketball at his basketball hoop. He was 14 years old, and right after being hit, his parents rushed outside to help him, but then found themselves being shot at too. The only other target William managed to hit was a car parked in the driveway across the street from him. Shortly after this, William went back inside his home and grabbed a .38 caliber revolver, a 20-gauge shotgun, and several rounds of ammunition, all of which he put in a gray bag. He then took his weaponry outside and loaded up his 1980 white Toyota Tercel. The time was now around 6:10 p.m. After hopping into his car, he drove wildly towards a nearby shopping center and in the process wound up running 2 cars off of the road. Because of this erratic driving, a retired police officer soon tried to follow William, but quickly lost sight of him near the intersection of Babcock Street and Palm Bay Road. After that, William pulled into a shopping area that included a Kmart, a McDonald's, an Eckerd pharmacy, a Publix supermarket, a place called Luria's, a jewelry gallery, a Winn-Dixie supermarket, a Burger King, and a Chili's. Upon stopping in the parking lot and then getting out of his car near the Publix, William took aim and fired at a few of the random bystanders both inside the store and in the parking lot. 3 of the people walking out of the Publix at the time were roommates by the names of Imad al-Tawakkuli, Nabil al-Hamali, and Faisal al-Muteri. All of them were college students from the country of Kuwait. Imad was an 18-year-old attendee of Florida Tech. He was shot in the upper leg, on the left side of his body, and in his lungs. Nabil was 25 and an attendee of Brevard Community College. He was shot in the back, shoulder, stomach, and hand. Both Imad and Nabil were killed. The 3rd student, Faisal, was also shot and seriously wounded, but ended up surviving. Next, though, William fired at a man running through the strip mall sidewalk by the name of Douglas and missed. After that, he shot at and hit Eric Messerbauer, and Eric was wounded, but not seriously. Then William fired at a woman sitting in a car by the name of Ruth Green. Ruth was a 67-year-old retiree who had been a resident of Palm Bay for 23 years at that point. The only reason why she even went to the store that day was to buy lettuce for her guinea pig. William shot her once after she finished parking and only wounded her, but then walked up closer to her car, shot her again, and killed her. After killing Ruth, William returned to where Imad and Nabil were laying dead and fired some more rounds into their lifeless bodies. Then, following the damage he did here, William returned to his white Toyota, got in, and drove a little further up the shopping center near the place called Luria's. While driving, he shot his rifle out of the window at yet another woman in her car. From that point, he then traveled across the street to the parking lot of the Winn-Dixie supermarket. Once he was finished parking, he grabbed his rifle, got out of the car, and began heading towards the store. At the same time as this, a 25-year-old man by the name of Ted Boudin had also pulled into the parking lot in his Chevy Camaro. Suddenly, Ted saw a figure emerge from behind a row of cars and began firing at him. According to Ted, he saw a puff of smoke and the glass on his windshield breaking. He ended up being shot once in his left arm, but survived and lived to tell the tale. After that, a police cruiser pulled up with its lights flashing. Driving the vehicle was a 27-year-old officer by the name of Ron Grogan. Officer Grogan was the first officer at the scene. Unfortunately, by the time Grogan pulled up, he immediately found his vehicle being sprayed with gunfire. William didn't kill him with the first several rounds, but while Grogan was stunned, William walked up to the side of the police cruiser, shot through the window, and finished him off with a shot to the head. Overall, the chaos was mounting. William had already killed 4 people and wounded several more, and shoppers and workers in the nearby Winn-Dixie supermarket were frantically trying to escape from the store. Soon, William saw a man through the glass doors of the store and shot at him while he was finishing checking out. The man's name was Ruben Torres. Ruben was a 39-year-old mailman, and he had gone to Winn-Dixie in order to buy some shrimp for dinner. After William fired at him, the contents in Ruben's grocery bag he was holding went flying, and he quickly dropped to the ground for safety. Seconds later, Ruben was able to crawl to the glass doors and then somehow managed to pull off the doors from the tracks. From that point, Ruben ran out to his car in the parking lot to grab a gun. At the same time as this, William had become engaged in a gunfight outside with another police officer who pulled up in his police cruiser. The officer's name was Gerald Johnson, and the time was now approximately 6:26 p.m. When Officer Johnson pulled into the parking lot, he got out of his police cruiser with a revolver in his hand. Quickly, the two exchanged gunfire. Johnson completely emptied his revolver at William at a relatively close range, but missed every shot. William, however, was able to hit Johnson in the leg. After being hit in the leg, Officer Johnson hobbled away a bit further into the parking lot to reload and duck behind a car, but then William stalked him and shot him several more times, effectively killing him. Meanwhile, as William was busy with Johnson, Ruben Torres, who had escaped from the store, had successfully ran to his car in the parking lot and grabbed his gun from his car's glove compartment. After that, Ruben ran out and began firing at William, but quickly ran out of bullets. William fired at him too, and missed. When Ruben then returned to his car to acquire more ammunition, he found himself being apprehended by the police. Evidently, these new officers that arrived at the scene thought Ruben was a second gunman, and despite the fact that he tried explaining to them that he was attempting to stop the shooter, they handcuffed him and put him in the back of a police car. Later on, Ruben would be credited with helping to distract William, but in the immediate aftermath, some people viewed him as a wannabe vigilante. Anyway, while Ruben was being arrested, William ran into the Winn-Dixie supermarket through the open space where the doors had been. As he made his way inside, several people who were still in the store were trying to escape through the back door. William fired at this group of people and managed to hit a man while he was running out of the exit. The victim's name was Lester Watson. Lester was a 51-year-old man who was married with 4 children. When Lester was shot, as many as 8 people witnessed it from a vantage point behind the store in a ditch. All 8 of them had begun hiding in the ditch immediately after running out of the Winn-Dixie. But after killing Lester, William shut the back door and then went around the store looking for more victims. This was the moment that the shooting became a hostage situation and a police standoff took place. Inside the ladies' restroom, William found 2 women by the names of Judy Larson and Robin Brown. Before long, William let Judy go and told her to go outside and have the police turn the lights off in the building and get him a car. Robin, however, he kept hostage. Meanwhile, Robin wasn't suspecting any of this whatsoever. She was a 21-year-old frozen food stocker at the store and on her dinner break at the time. On a few occasions, William pointed a gun at Robin's head and said he would kill her, but throughout the next several hours, they had a series of long conversations back and forth. Together, the pair swapped stories about the difficulties each faced in their lives and their bad childhoods. According to Robin, William grabbed a six-pack of beer at one point and she asked if she could have a beer, but William responded saying, "No, drinking's bad. See what it did to me?" Other than that, they both ate chips and soda. Meanwhile, people inside the store were hiding in various locations, such as the broom closet and the meat cooler. When the authorities arrived, they grouped together outside the front of the building and a hostage negotiation began. In total, there were over 300 police officers at the scene by evening time. It was a very intense and nerve-wracking situation where anything could have happened. Frequently, Robin tried pleading with William to give himself up, but he wouldn't. Then at 10:20 a.m., a SWAT team dispersed around the area, including in the ditches behind the store, on top of the building, and in front of the store. Additionally, a helicopter was sent out to circle the building. As for William's interactions with the hostage negotiators, well, these continued throughout the course of the next several hours. The authorities used loud bullhorns to interact with him, and William made several demands, including one for an airplane. Police said that he had alternated between sounding extremely depressed and extremely angry, and he was incoherent a lot of the time. At one point, he started asking for his car keys and his car, but it was too hard to interpret exactly what he meant. All in all, it was less of a hostage negotiation than it was an interrogation with a crazy drunk man. William made multiple explicit threats to do away with himself and was just overall very disagreeable. Part of the exchange was documented by an 18-year-old aspiring young journalist named Sean Doyle. "Bill, we called your wife. She is real disturbed. Please tell me how many people you have in the store." Bill, of course, was William's nickname, just for your information. "Bill, how many people besides Robin are with you in the store?" At this point, Doyle was unable to hear William's response. But then the hostage negotiator evidently replied, "Thank you very much. I trust you. Trust me. We are not going to hurt you. Your yelling is not going to help. All I want is a solution. Give me the details later." Finally, around 12:41 a.m., William let his hostage Robin go. Less than an hour later, 3 shots of tear gas were shot into the building, and then this was followed up by a concussion grenade. Finally, at 1:57 a.m., William was stunned and disoriented and captured near the back door. He resisted by kicking an officer and was then tackled by another, but all his efforts were in vain. They handcuffed him, put him in the back of a police car, and took him in. William Brian Cruz's reign of terror was officially over. Overall, he was responsible for 6 deaths and 14 injuries. But right after being apprehended, William claimed not to remember what happened, which was exactly the same thing his father said decades before when he shot up a person's home. Interesting how the world comes full circle like that sometimes. Also, during William's interrogation, the police filmed him and he said, "I just wanted to scare people. I imagine I threatened some people. Did I use some profanity?" Anyway, following William Cruz's trial on April 5th of 1989, he was officially convicted on 6 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced a few months later to death row. Believe it or not, though, due to the appeal process, he never actually ended up being executed. Instead, William died in prison from natural causes on November 29th of 2009 at the age of 82. Now, although this case happened a few decades ago, it's important never to forget the victims. They were fathers, husbands, friends, and even a wife. Imad al-Tawakkuli and Nabil al-Hameli were 2 young men from Kuwait. They came to America looking for an education, and they were brutally killed for no reason while shopping. Ruth Green was a 67-year-old church-going woman who everybody adored. She was known for her friendly demeanor and close involvement with the local community. The police officers killed in the line of duty were Officer Ronald Midgley Grogan and Officer Gerald Douglas Johnson. Officer Grogan was a 27-year-old man who was known for being extremely smart, meticulous, and outgoing. He had only been on the force for 6 months at the time of his death and had just gotten married in February of 1987. Before becoming a police officer, Officer Grogan worked at a string of pizza restaurants. Officer Johnson was a 28-year-old former Army infantryman with special training in the use of small weapons. He was hired less than a year before and was known as a quiet, simple man who never really complained. Officer Johnson had a dry sense of humor and was very sarcastic. According to associates, he always wanted to be a police officer and said that his short time on the job was the most fun he ever had. He died doing what he loved and left behind a wife. The names of Officer Grogan and Johnson have never been forgotten. Even to this day, there are yearly events honoring their service. Rest in peace to both of them. Lastly, Lester Watson. Lester was a beloved 51-year-old family man of the highest caliber. He lived in Brevard County for 20 years and was a quality insurance inspector for Harris Corps. Lester left behind 4 kids and a wife. Rest in peace to everybody that was killed in this tragic incident. Most of the injured were unnamed in official sources, so I can't provide a lot of details about them. But for those that are curious about what happened to the 14-year-old boy who was shot while playing basketball across the street from William's home, well, he made it out alive. As we talked about, his name was John Rich. But I will say that this was not the same John Rich who is now a famous country singer, just for your information. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please like and subscribe because it's all we do. I also have an all-exclusive Patreon if you're interested in that. There's a bunch of tiers to choose from, and the third one allows for you to see a Patreon-only video, and that tier and the second one allow you to have your name at the end of each High Time Crime video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.